Hey folks, we're live, but we're going to wait for the audience to join us for just a minute here before we actually start the session. So give us a moment. Okay. Make sure we got everything up here. I think we do. We're live on LinkedIn. Ready to go, Colby?
Let's do it.
All right. Why don't you pull that screen up and we'll get started.
Okay, great. Give me just a moment here and I will share my screen. All right.
Awesome.
Jeff, I have to compliment you on these graphics, by the way. These graphics are fantastic. I can't take any credit for any of these graphics. This is all Jeff.
Thanks, Colby. All right, folks. Welcome, everyone, to Out of Sight Tactical Privacy for a Risky World. We're thrilled to have you join us today for what promises to be an insightful and I hope critically important session. I'm Jeff Jockisch, and it's my pleasure to introduce Colby and myself today. I'm Jeff Jockisch, as I just said, a digital privacy researcher who's been independent for a long time before I joined ObscureIQ. And with Colby, and I do a lot of research into commercial surveillance, data broker ecosystems, regulatory policy, and helping people recover their privacy. Colby, our CEO, is primarily doing work in open source intelligence. He's an expert also in footprint suppression and counter surveillance tactics. He's the one who tries to sort of exploit some of the privacy issues that are out there to better protect our clients. Do you want to add anything to that, Colby?
No, I think that was great. And everybody, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it. We're really excited to share this content with you guys. So I think that's great, Jeff. You gave a great introduction to not only yourself, but also me. And let's get started.
Great. Well, together, Colby and I sort of support clients operating in both the adversarial or volatile environments, providing guidance that we think is both discreet and defensible. At Obscure, we sort of differentiate ourselves with this extensive privacy research, maintaining a codex of about 8,600 organizations that are either specifically data brokers or types of consumer organizations that do surveillance, whether it's ad tech or other ecosystems similar to that. We believe that this is the largest and deepest data set of categorized, tagged, and scored commercial surveillors in existence. And we find that our codex, that's what we call it, is invaluable in our ability to delete client information and advance our understanding of these ecosystems. So let's talk about this session in particular. It's sort of designed as a private training session for high profile and high risk individuals who face elevated digital exposure. It's specifically relevant to people who, are corporate or nonprofit leaders. If you're in a family office or you have a lot of professional exposure, or really anyone who has a high elevated threat level. The reality here is that our personal data in this world is increasingly being weaponized. Surveillance is expanding. AI has made targeted social engineering easier than ever, even for people with limited skill sets. Just like you're probably reading about, hackers that have very few skills being able to hack things. Well, people with limited skill sets are able to get at your personal data more easily than ever now. Traditional security measures are simply not enough. Even if you're hiring bodyguards, while those bodyguards can keep you personally secure, you still got a whole digital domain, and if somebody can crack that digital domain, physical security may no longer be enough. Right. So today we're going to give you background on both the issues, why you need to be worried, and deliver you some actionable tactics that'll help you better understand and control your digital footprint. Whether your goal is personal safety, operational security, or protecting those around you, this training will give you and equip you to better take action. We're proud to offer this class of service to both clients and the wider community free of charge, because everyone deserves privacy. So let's dig into the training. You want to go ahead and advance the slides there, Colby?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a couple different things we want to talk about. I'm just going to sort of give you a quick overview. First, Colby's going to talk a little bit about the investigation we did into Matthew Leibelsberger. We'll talk a little bit about why privacy is important, sort of do an overview of commercial surveillance. We'll talk about location data and pattern of life. Go ahead and advance.
Yeah.
We'll then talk about how you can actually do data deletion and talk about going off grid and how you can actually plug data leaks. And then we'll open the floor up to questions. Hopefully we can get through all of that and give you plenty of time to ask questions. So let's start off, Colby, talking about the Matthew Leibelsberger case. Hopefully everybody remembers, things changed so quickly today. The Matthew Leibelsberger incident happened back around New Year's when this gentleman sort of went a little crazy and blew up a Cybertruck at the Trump venue in Las Vegas, right?
That's exactly correct. Yeah, so allow me to share my screen here and I'll kind of very quickly go through this. And what I want to really drill down, guys, is this is to show you how very quickly somebody with a little bit of knowledge is able to take maybe just an email address and turn it into actual intelligence on you. So let's go ahead and start with this. So Matthew Leibelsberger, he, as Jeff had alluded to, he's commonly referred to as the Cybertruck bomber. On New Year's Day of this year, he had driven to the Trump Tower in Las Vegas and exploded the Cybertruck that he had rented. So what transpired afterwards was fairly interesting. So there's a very popular podcaster named Sean Ryan. Him and Sam Shoemate had both received an email address, and you can see the email address up here, that was sent to them claiming to be the Matthew Leibelsberger. There was some discussion as to whether or not this email was actually him. So what I decided to do was I was like, okay, that's fine. Let's go ahead and see if I can prove out that this is him or if it is not him. So I quickly did a search on OSINT Industries. It's one of my favorite OSINT tools here. And when I did this, I was able to get back a little bit of hints here. So two of the main parts here that are really interesting is I can see that his phone number ends in 84, and I can also see that he's registered for the Tesla app here. I then just went to, this is literally a free people search website. And what I can see here is a phone number associated with him is ending in 84. So what I ended up doing was taking that phone number. I went back to OSINT Industries. I plugged that in, and I'm able to get a few other pieces of information here. Some pieces that are fairly interesting. So this is a partial email address that will probably look very familiar if you had seen the email address above, his Proton email address. And then additionally, I also was able to get an email hint, just m at likelygmail.com. So I wanted to actually go and find what that email address was. I have a hint and I want to get an understanding of what that is. I go back to the People Search website and I look through the email addresses that are there. So Sarah Livelsberger, no. Uh, Geo11, maybe. I don't. Maybe we don't know. But I did see one that matched the email hint that we have just above. I took that back to OSINT Industries and I ran it, and I was able to get some additional validating information. Again, phone number ending here in 84. You're seeing this all over the place. And then Samsung provided us a rather large hint here with most of the digits of his phone number actually exposed here, which when placed in order, all completely match what we found from the People Search site. Again, this was a free People Search website that we were able to pull this from. So, and this is just us pulling all of this together to be able to show out to you guys here. But this was a very simple OSINT workflow. It took me between 5 to 10 minutes to actually do. All I was doing was ingesting one email address, pivoting off of that email address to go look at a People Search website to obtain his phone number, ran a couple of other queries in OSINT Industries, and I was able to positively identify that, yes, the person who sent this email address, who owned this email address, definitively was Matthew Leibelsberger. And I wanted to showcase a lesson to everybody on the call as to how much information is out there about you with literally just the knowledge of what your email address is. Unfortunately, it doesn't take much to get a lot of information.
Yeah. The other lesson I think that's sort of important to gain from this is that the information about you aggregates around data points like your email address and your phone number. And so somebody with the tools and the knowledge like Colby can simply search for those phone numbers and those email addresses. They're like indexes and identity numbers, just like a social security number. People think that the social security number is like really special. It's not really anymore. If you have an email address that you've kept for several years, 5 years, 10 years, that's probably more indicative of your identity now than your social security number, because more
I'm gonna learn a
information is
lot. I'll
aggregated.
learn a lot more about you that way. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just the truth. I would much rather have that.
it's crazy. So you have to be really careful with that kind of information. And let's talk about why. So let's go to the next screen, Colby.
Yep.
So this is a little bit of a history of privacy, and I think if you click, I think it sort
Click
of like
through it.
clicks through this a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So initially back, we had some cavemen, right? This guy had sort of like no concept of privacy. But then around the Victorian age, we started to understand that we needed a little bit of privacy, right? Because people were starting to gather together in cities, and we started to understand that that we needed some privacy. And we eventually get to sort of today where they're monitoring everything, and people are understanding now that maybe we need to start to get back some of that privacy. Go ahead and let's go to the next slide. So this is a really complicated slide, and I want to sort of walk you through a little bit of it because I don't want this to overwhelm you, right? If you look down in this bottom corner, you can actually see that for maybe the past 15 or 20 years, there's been a lot of data breaches, there's been a lot of government spying, there's been a lot of ransomware, and that's really a lot of the harm that's very obvious to us that's been happening. But if you go all the way back to the start and look at this red line, you can sort of see how technology has sort of evolved over the past 45 years, right? We started getting, personal computers and the web and eBay and Google and Facebook and iPhone, big data, the Internet of Things, now AI. And all of this means more and more opportunity for our world to change into a digital world and for more and more of our information to be collected, right? And over this time, we've had more and more what we call sort of surveillance capitalism, more and more companies collecting our data. and utilizing that data in ways that may not be so good for us, right? Not necessarily in our interest. And so we can look at this top level line here, and you can see a lot of privacy laws that sort of started way back around 1980 with the Fair Credit Reporting Act and the Privacy Act and FERPA and things like that. And then we had sort of a second wave where we started saying, well, maybe we should protect our medical information with HIPAA and our financial information with Gramm-Leach-Bliley and our kids with COPA, right? And we had these sort of like laws that were sort of more focused on a particular channel of information. But there was never really any comprehensive laws, at least in the United States. Europe started to develop things, and there was a little bit more of a comprehensive approach, right? Now we're getting more comprehensive approaches across the world, less so here in the United States, but the world is moving a little bit more toward comprehensive than we are. But regardless of that, what we are seeing is a lot of fines that are happening, bigger and bigger fines for violations. So things are changing in the privacy world, even if you're not necessarily seeing all of that come to fruition quite yet. Okay, let's go ahead and move past this. Where are we? We're 18 minutes in, so we need to move a little bit more quickly than we're going now. So one of the things that I think is sort of important here is to make you understand that privacy is really key for democracy. And I'm not going to walk through all of these here, but it's really important to know that if we don't have privacy, we really can't have free expression of thought, right? It protects us from government overreach, and it also helps us be able to make informed and autonomous decisions. And we can go through this more if you have questions about it, but we're going to go ahead and get past this, right? So another sort of key insight here is to understand that part of the reason that there's so much data collected about us is because data brokers are just almost completely unregulated. Now, you saw all those laws, right, that have been passed for privacy. They essentially are able to be avoided by data brokers. All of them are sort of like focused on individual areas, and they do a lot of good in certain ways, but data brokers are sort of a general catch-all, and they can sort of grab any information that's not specifically targeted by legislation, and they do that, right? And so in general, the ability to collect information about you and create a profile of you is unregulated, right? If you actually go to a hairstylist, there's more regulations on a hairstylist than there is on your data. And that's just freaking crazy. So there's a few examples here, right? So Congress, right? There's zero federal privacy regulation. There's a reseller exemption that was passed to the Fair Credit Reporting Act that essentially says that unless you particularly call something a credit report, it doesn't have to be regulated. There are limitations in the coverage of your medical data and your financial data. So if it's specifically done by a healthcare provider or a specific type of organization or of a bank, right, or a specific type of financial organization, then it's covered. But if it's not, right, if it's just like Google or Facebook or some data broker, then they can grab all that information without any regulation. There's a COPA law, right, that protects our children's data. And it's really very strong, except it has this huge loophole that essentially says that if they didn't know that the data was from a child, it doesn't matter, right? Which is crazy. So they just say, oh, I didn't realize that kid was 12 or 10 or 5. So there's no fine in that case. There's more.
Right. I mean, I think we can all remember whenever many of us can remember whenever we were creating, a Facebook account whenever we were younger, or MySpace account when we were younger, and there was a minimum age, and everybody lied. If you're under 18, everybody lied. So, now knowing what we do, very likely the kids who were doing that were actually just shipping off their data to brokers at this point. So. Yeah, it's just it's crazy how it's all connected in this large ecosystem, but yeah, it's just small things like that.
Now, there are little laws and little regulations, and the regulators can, in some cases, take down some of these organizations that are pretty knowingly collecting children's data. And those laws there's some laws for children's data, especially in the States, getting passed. But still, it's like sort of like, trying to stop a monsoon, right, with a umbrella. It's tough, right? And there's a lot of lawyers in those corporations that are keeping the regulators at bay. So there's that. Okay, let's move past this. So this is just the ad tech ecosystem. We're not going to talk much about it, but the entire internet is really run off of ad revenue. It's sort of sad that we sort of developed this way, but people don't want to pay for things on the internet. We've got this sort of conception that information that we get on the internet should be free, and so as a result, essentially we get served ads instead of actually paying for things. And so the ad networks and how all this stuff built out is crazy, and it's stupendously no, it's full of a lot of fraud, and it's full of a lot of now surveillance, because they want more and more pieces of information about you to target things more and more effectively, though it's not really a lot of clear evidence that all of that even works, that all having 400 or 5,000 or 40,000 pieces of data about you actually allows them to better target ads and get you to buy the things that they want to buy. They're certainly surveilling you more, but whether it's actually more effective for the advertiser is pretty much unclear. They're certainly charging the advertiser a lot more money, though. It's billions and trillions of dollars in that industry.
I will say, like, the average person looking at this slide, it looks extremely complicated. By all means, I mean, Jeff and I have been studying this for years at this point. It's way more complicated than what this makes it look like.
Yeah.
Take it times 10. There's so many different sources, selectors, new ways of tracking that are coming out constantly. It's almost like every few months there's something else coming out. So yeah, when we call it an ecosystem, that's truly what it is.
Well, the sad thing here is, right, I mean, we could talk in a lot of details here. I'm talking in very vague terms, right? But a lot of this is built upon what's now called a real-time bidding system. And based upon that, right, you're giving up your location to 300, 500, 700 different companies or organizations every single day just by cruising the web, right? And you're generally cruising the web on your mobile device on some kind of browser. And just by doing that, you're giving your location up. Now, Google and other organizations would say that, well, it's not Colby or Jeff that are giving up their location. It's some identifier. But the problem is that there's so much data that's connected to each of those identifiers that it's not hard for somebody with the willpower to be able to connect all of those data points back and say, oh, well, that's Colby, because it's connected to this piece of information, this piece of information, this piece of information. And there are companies that are doing that, and there are bad actors that are doing that, and there are adversaries in China and Russia and different places doing that. And they're gathering these huge pots of location data so that they can actually say that, hey, Jeff, was here and here and here and here, all these places, and now they've got a roadway, a path. What do we call that? Not the path of life, Colby. I'm blanking on what that's called.
Oh yeah, pattern of life.
Yeah, they've got my pattern of
Yeah.
life, and that is incredibly valuable, not just to an advertiser, but to an adversary.
Think about it like this, right? From a say from attacker's perspective, who might have tools that can utilize ad tracking to track your geographical location. So they look at it on a map. Maybe they only need 4 points, right? Start off at your house, you go off to your work, you're there for about 8 hours, come back, go back to work, come back home. There's a really, really high likelihood that is the person that they might be tracking. It only takes a few points. And Jeff, I know you had some statistics around that at one point, but it doesn't take much.
Yeah, three or four points, geolocation points with precise timestamps, and you can identify 95% of Americans exactly who that American is. That's crazy. I mean, this kind of data is actually really valuable for solving crimes. For law enforcement, right? And you probably heard about them grabbing license plate data to find immigrants from Flock Safety and other organizations like this. Well, the cell phone data is actually much more invasive and tells you a lot more about pattern of life. It's harder to get, and so one of the reasons law enforcement has been going to the license plate data is because it's actually easier to get and faster to use, because it's actually generally more connected directly to an individual and to an identity. They don't have to go through the extra steps to connect it to a person, but it is connectable to a person. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so there's a lot of things to talk about here. So we just talked about sort of the ad tech data, but how does that data get collected, and what exactly is connected? We talked about sort of like location data, but once somebody has an SDK installed on your phone, they can collect so much more data than just location. I mean, frankly, they can collect, any data that the sensor on your iPhone or Android phone has, but they can also infer so much more data. I got to expand this so I can actually see a little bit of what I'm talking about, right? But they can grab.
It's like, what isn't?
Yeah,
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, they can grab your demographic information, right? But all kinds of things about what your device is. Is your device, being used? Is it against your ear? Is it in your pocket? Environmental things like, is it raining around you? Are you inside? Are you outside? Are you in a store? Are you near a certain type of store? Are you near people? Are you alone? I mean, think about how valuable that would be to a stalker. Is this guy outside? Is he alone? Is he got his phone in his pocket? Well, that's a perfect time to go grab him, right?
And one thing I wanted to add real quick was in terms of, if you're sitting in the audience wondering, what is an SDK? Think of it as really like the software, a lot of the software and the code behind every single one of the apps in your phone. Say if you have 50 different apps in your phone, you probably have about 50 different SDKs in there, all sucking up a lot of different data about you, largely all flowing into the ad tech ecosystem, getting parsed, parted out, and sold.
Yeah, absolutely. Checking over here to see if we've got any questions on the live stream. Hopefully it's not going to give me any. Okay, no feedback here. Good. Cool. I don't see any questions coming in yet. I'm going to hop back here and we'll keep going. So here's one example. You probably are all familiar with or have at least heard of the National Public Data Breach. This was a breach on a massive scale. Now, National Public Data was essentially an organization that was doing background checks for people. And it was a relatively small, not bigger than a mom and pop shop, but not a whole lot. But they had a massive amount of data and they didn't protect it particularly well. This included driver's license information and social security numbers, and all of this information got compromised. 2.9 billion people were included in this data breach, including like virtually every American and virtually every American social security number. So if your social security
you have a social security number,
it's probably out there now.
Yeah.
In fact, it was so big that some of the sources of data breach information, like Have I Been Pwned or databreach.com, some of the consumer sources, it took them up until even now, they're still sending more and more tranches of that data in that they've actually had to index, because indexing 2.9 billion records is a massive thing, right? And having to index it across multiple different things like your email address, your phone number, your name, your social security number, all of that stuff is just a massive amount of data. So it's crazy. But one thing that we'll talk a little bit more about is, because of this breach and other things that are happening now, you really want to go freeze your credit and consider getting a footprint wipe. But we'll talk a little bit more about that, right? Because this data, what's happening now with all these data breaches is, we have brokers, data brokers that are aggregating your information and creating profiles of you, right? Lots of these organizations. We told you we monitor sort of thousands of them. But the bad guys are starting to do that now too, right? The people on the dark web aren't just like grabbing bits of your data and trying to use them against you. They're actively grabbing all of the data that flows onto the dark web and creating dark web profiles of you. So they have like the criminal version of a credit bureau, right? Or the criminal version of Axiom sitting out there, right? So that they have these dark web profiles of you. And the more your information that gets breached, right, or that gets taken by ad tech and sucked up by them somehow, right, nefariously, the worse you are, right? So the more you're leaking your data and you continue to have bad privacy postures, right, or have big digital footprints, the worse off you are, because once it gets to the dark web, it's really hard to get rid of, maybe impossible. Think about that for a minute, right? All right. So let me switch the slide here. The FTC has been taking action against some of these organizations that are selling data. And I think it's important to sort of note here, we're at 33 minutes after, that it's not always just the fact that your data gets breached. It's often that your data gets sold, right? And a lot of these data brokers will try to only sell to good actors. But how do you know when you're selling it to a good guy versus a bad guy, or that the good guy you sell it to doesn't then give it to a bad guy, right? Or that the good guy you sell it to is actually taking care of it and keeping it safe, and he's not going to have some bad guy walk into his house and steal it from him. That's why all of your data is getting sold and resold, and it goes every place, right? And it gets to the dark web very easily, or to bad actors very easily. The FTC is trying to take action. Go ahead, Colby.
Yeah, just real quick. It's actually it's kind of crazy seeing screenshots of seeing screenshots of data breaches getting sold on the dark web. They're not expensive to buy, like at all. They're a few $100, generally speaking, and a few $100. It can get into the thousands. Sometimes if it's a really highly sought after breach, that they'll ask for exorbitant amounts of money. Some people, some actors will pay for it, some won't. But it's not particularly expensive to do it. And then eventually, once it's sold off to so many people, it ends up just getting shared for free anyway.
Yep. And so to get back to the point here, though, right, the FTC is trying to take action against some of these companies that are unlawfully tracking and selling our data. But a lot of the use cases are legitimately lawful because there are no real comprehensive privacy laws, right? And there are very few restrictions against them selling the data. Now, there are a couple new laws that actually say that you can't sell bulk American data to organizations that are adversaries like Russia and China, but I haven't actually seen a lot of enforcement action taking place against organizations yet. And supposedly you're not allowed to sell it to anybody who might give it to them, which would impede even more sales. I haven't seen anything. I mean, maybe that stuff's taking place, but if it is, it's not newsworthy or it's not in the news. So I don't know what's going on there. It's probably worth noting that privacy is a cross-party issue, right? It doesn't really, it affects everybody, right? I mean, it's not really a liberal issue or a conservative issue. Republicans and Democrats are both in favor of doing privacy controls. They have maybe a different slant on how they might implement some of these things, right? And generally, Republicans are more favorable to business, and since data brokers are businesses too, maybe they're a little bit less inclined to regulate them. But still, right, you have to do something in order to stop some of this behavior. I think there's a couple more of these FTC cases. We can just sort of zoom past them.
Yeah, that sounds good.
But it is probably worth noting that there are a lot of car privacy problems now, as well as location data privacy problems, go ahead and go past these, right? We've done a lot of research into location data brokers, and your car manufacturers are giving up your data or selling it off. They're starting to get a lot of pushback now from that. But the recent location data, as we said before, is so important is because it gives up your pattern of life, right? And they can make a lot of inferences from that pattern of life, from the things that you buy, from the we can get the location data from apps, right? From the real-time bid stream, from harvesting your social media, from your cars, from your license plates. So it's really hard to avoid that location data collection. Go ahead, Colby.
Gotcha. Okay, now we're here at the geo guessing.
Yeah, I think we'll just skip this, right? But
Yeah,
they can harvest your data right out of the background of your images and figure out where you are just from analyzing the background of your images. So be careful what you share.
and technology is getting really good, really, really good.
Yeah, we could do a whole couple hour presentation on that. And this is talking really about the pattern of life, right? And how the pattern of life can be inferred based upon where you went. You went from, your house to the school, to the doctor's office, to the shopping mall, to this shopping mall, to the pub, to your friend's house, right? What does that reveal about your life, right? It might reveal a story, right? And an AI might read that story and come to some conclusions about you, what kind of a person you are. Well, I mean, it might have the right conclusions and right inferences, or it might make completely inaccurate inferences, right? That change your profile and influence your life. And like I said, those inferences could be correct or they could be completely wrong. And that can really affect you. It can affect lots of things about your life. We don't have time to really go into a lot of this, but it could be really bad. Like it could infer because you shopped right over here next to this weed dispensary that you're buying marijuana, even if you weren't. Right? It can infer that because you go to this pub every night that you're a drinker, but maybe you're actually working there. Right, trying to put your son, feed your son and your sick grandfather or something, right? Because maybe you were actually getting the weed for him, right? Oh, who knows? I mean, all those inferences could be completely wrong, right? That they're making about you. Let's go to the next page.
Okay. You want me to keep pushing forward, Jeff, or is this good?
Yeah, let's just keep going past this. These are all the different types of inferences they might make. They can make inferences about your religious beliefs, your financial status, your health status, right?
Yep.
This is another sort of page, right? This is sort of shows how the flow of data might happen, right? If you were taking a survey from advisors about where you might want to go to college, they might give the data to Experian to get additional public data about you, census data, credit data, tax data, subscription data, right? They might also give it to ALC, who's then going to send it to Ethnic Tech to give them your name and address to predict your ethnicity, your religion, your language. And they repackage all that data and send it to a couple of marketers who then send ads to you and other things. So you gave your information to one company to take a survey. Maybe you got some value out of that, right? But your data is now with 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 other companies downstream. That's how your information proliferates. And this is just a really simple example. Right? We've sort of created a taxonomy of all these different types of data brokers. There are a lot. We don't think anybody is really looking at this ecosystem in quite the way we are. Let's keep going. So let's talk about data deletion going off the grid. The way we help people go off the grid is really with a two-step process, right? Audit your data, right? Understand what your risk is and where all of your footprint data is, and then go do a wipe, right? We think that in order to be able to delete your data from data brokers and from other places, right? Because your data is not just in data broker hands, it's elsewhere. that you have to do an audit first to understand where your risk is, where your data resides, and then do a footprint wipe. Otherwise, you're going to have selectors that remain out there, and bad actors are going to be able to find you based upon that. You can go do a wipe without doing an audit, but you're going to leave things out there, and you're going to have risk that remains. Let's go ahead and go to the next page. So how do we plug the leaks? Because there are a lot of them, right? There's, your car, your TV, your devices, your phone, right? All of these things are giving leaking data on a daily basis. That's another thing you sort of need to think about, right? Even if Colby and I were to go out there and wipe your footprint clean, right? And you had a pristine footprint, you type your name into Google and nothing pops up, right? Unless you die right then and never create another piece of data in your life, right? Your footprint is going to start building up again. Unless you're very careful about how you do that, right? Because, okay, you're still using the same email address, you're still using the same phone number, you're still using the same devices, right? You're still driving your car, you're still talking and watching TV on your smart TV, right? All of these things are continuing to leak data, and different organizations are sucking that up. So there are things you can do to change those behaviors. And we're going to talk about a few of them. So we have a document that you can download from our website called 5 Moves to Block Spies, Trackers, and Data Brokers. This is sort of our basic advice to anyone who wants to stop being tracked in the most obvious ways. There are lots of additional things you can do, but this is sort of the basic things. So let's go ahead and go to the next page. So this one is getting a privacy phone and getting secure messaging are probably two of the larger things. You don't necessarily have to get a privacy phone if you're careful about what you do with it. But the privacy phone is not so much that somebody's monitoring your conversations. It's about all the other apps and shit that's on your phone, right? So if you click on the privacy phone, I don't think that's actually going to work. I think it's going to go to the wrong page now. I don't think I updated those links. What that would have normally gone to is actually a link that would show you an analysis that we've done of probably like 15 different privacy phones, and which one is better or worse in terms of privacy and in terms of anonymity and in terms of cybersecurity and use and different things like that. Any phone that you get that's not a standard Apple or Google or Samsung or whatever other phone, right, that's coming from big tech is probably going to be much, much better. There are sort of degrees of how much you could sort of go down those paths, but if you can get out of the Google or Apple ecosystem, you're going to be much better off, right?
Yeah, and the best part about all of that is the cheapest solution is the best, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You are losing
hear a lot of
some
people,
things, right? Because you're gonna have to stop using some of the apps that you probably love, because those are the ones that are grabbing most of your data.
Here's the thing, right? A lot of times with privacy, you are sacrificing convenience. And one thing that Jeff and I really try to pride ourselves in doing at ObscureIQ is running as fast and as far as you want us to go. If you want to have maximum convenience but maximum privacy with the amount of convenience that you want, we'll help you. We'll help you configure your phone. We'll help you configure your social media apps because we realize that, hey, listen, not everybody wants to go totally off the grid, and we understand that. So it's a really big balancing act, and there's a lot of different kind of playbooks for that.
Yep. All right, let's go to the next page. So there's phones, there's messaging apps, right? The second sort of step is your financial data. The first key thing to do is to go freeze your credit, because if anybody gets a hold of your data and probably already have a hold of some of it and they can get a hold of more of it, is that you want to freeze your credit so they can't actually get at your money. Because the first thing they're going to try to do is set up accounts in your name or things like that. And freezing your credit is the single easiest, best and cheapest way to do that. You can also shield your financial information by doing things like getting a separate laptop and only do financial transactions on that separate laptop, right? You can also get virtual credit cards so that you're never using your actual credit card number. You're only using essentially an alias for that credit card number whenever you do financial transactions online. And those virtual credit card numbers can have like a limit on them. So maybe it's only got 500 or 1,000 or $5,000 on it. So then if somebody steals it, the worst they can do is steal X amount of money from you. Okay. The other thing you can do, we've got some guides too, is how to get your money when you're off the grid. So let's say you want to go overseas or you want to go completely off grid. How can you actually access money when that's the actual case, right? We've got some guides on how to actually do that if your situation is that dire. Right? Let's go ahead and go further. So the browsing habits that you have can also leave a lot of information on the table. So you never want to use Chrome. You've got to get rid of your Chrome browser if you want to stop being tracked. So there are a bunch of different privacy first browsers. We've got an analysis that'll help you pick a good one. You also want to use a VPN to hide your online activity. There is some debate in the online community, even in the OSINT community, about whether you should use a VPN. You should use a VPN, but you have to use a good one. You can't use a free one. You have to use a named one that doesn't do any logging. And the reason you want to do this is this. The VPN company is going to know where you are going online, right? So you're essentially telling them where you're going instead of telling your telecom company, right? So you're essentially hiding your activity from your telecom company. But here's the thing. Your telecom company is surely going to sell your location data, right? Which they can tell from your browsing, as well as wherever you might go to anybody that wants to get that information, including the government, right? And they make a lot of money on that information. The VPN company is probably not going to sell that information. So you're much safer if you do that. So that's why we recommend a VPN. You should also use secure DNS for pretty much the same reasons, because that hides your DNS information, which can also be used sort of for the same reason. It's a little bit less clear, but it does sort of the same thing. And then the final thing that you could do, I think, is this step 5? Yeah. You can also sort of manage your permissions. So if you're going to use apps at all, whether that's on your phone or on the web, you want to manage those privacy permissions. We recommend Block Party for social apps. What it does is it helps you make sure that you're giving the least amount of information to those apps like Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram, things like that. And then if you're going to interact on platforms like Twitter/X or other things, we would recommend that you don't install an app at all on your phone, but rather you use it on the web and create a sock puppet account, which is essentially a way of saying essentially a pseudonym for you that's not connected back to your identity. That way you can actually interact and you can be Bob Snowflake instead of your actual name. That gives you the ability to have some free speech without actually connecting to your real identity. Now, some people obviously need to have a real identity in social media, and so maybe you want to do that as well, or instead of. But it sort of depends on your use case. And then, sort of the final piece here is you want to use unique names and emails for different accounts. So we talked at the beginning, right, how Colby was able to track down, who this guy was and prove that he sent a particular email based upon the header in that information. Well, if you continue to use, if I continue to use jeffjockisch@gmail.com, guess what? We're going to be able to attribute all kinds of information to me. But if I go and get, some new email address at Tutanota or at Proton Mail or at, any other sort of email domain that's not commercially surveilled, right, and isn't tied to my name, right, and is new, then the data brokers, right, and other people like Colby aren't going to be able to attribute that to me very easily. And data is not going to be connected to that new email address. So if we do that with our email addresses and with our phone numbers, right, and even with things like our usernames, all these other identifiers about us, then we can actually hide pretty well. So
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, go ahead, Colby.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So me doing the Leibelsberger investigation would have been near impossible if he had used symbol login, if he had used my sudo. I really think those are, and generally speaking, I mean, with us, we do generally recommend simple login, my sudo. The other ones here listed here are also absolutely fantastic too. But we have, yeah, I would say we probably have our favorites. But yeah, it would have been near impossible to do that otherwise. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yep. So I think that's pretty much what we have. Is there another slide? I forget, Colby. Actually, I think there are a couple more. So yeah,
Yeah, I think password safety, and yeah.
So I mean, you also need to make sure that you're using passwords, right? Because if somebody does get a hold of some of your data or breaks into your computer, you need to have your information well secured. And so we recommend that you use a password manager and that you also use password safety. This slide is sort of important to show you, right? You need long passwords. For a long time, people said, "Oh, make these really complicated passwords, right? Like star C, at sign, capital D, one, capital Y, lowercase z." All that shit doesn't mean much of anything. It's helpful, right? But length is really what's most important, right? As you can sort of see from this example, if I use this Denver young Jeezy peg leg, right? That's much more secure than these complicated ones, right? Or it's at
And
least
for
as secure.
anybody wondering, these are just real passwords. These really Denver Young Jeezy Peg Leg 9 is his actual password.
I can't
That I'm
confirm or
just I'm
deny.
just he just went into his password manager and copied and pasted everything here. Now,
But you see
I
how,
had to make a
yeah,
joke, but this is so true because the attitude toward passwords over years and years and years has always been, and this is still, by the way, still told, which is like, okay, the more special characters you have, the better. It's like, no, length. More and more studies are coming out, and they're using the decryption technologies to try to like solve this. And really, the newest studies are showing, like Jeff said, length is really what really matters here.
yeah. So there might be one more slide. I think I added in one more
There's a
password slide.
few.
Yeah. Oh, that's the echo key slide. So um, there's another thing here. I think I'm going to sort of skip this, but there are some techniques we have that you can use to sort of create passwords on the fly if you have to, if you don't have like a password manager available. And so we can share that with you if you're interested. Um, it's sort of a way to sort of do sort of like the Denver Young Jeezy thing, but to do it on the fly if you have to, right? Um, we're not going to walk through this, but you can look it up if you want. It's pretty cool. So I think that's pretty much it. Here's our contact information. If you got any other questions, I'm going to check over here and see if we got any questions. I don't see anything on LinkedIn. We had a lot of questions last session, but I'm not seeing much on this one unless I'm looking in the wrong spot. Is that repackaging and transporting data when you opt out of the customer, the survey owner being able to sell your data? Is that repackaging and transporting of data when you opt out of the survey, the owner able to sell your data? I'm not sure exactly what that means. Is that repackaging and transporting of data when you opt out of the survey, owner being able to sell your data? So I think she's saying when we were talking about the survey, of the college student, if they were to opt out of selling that, if they were to still sell that data, would that be a violation? Probably yes. But I don't even know how you would actually catch a company doing that. I mean, that's one of the problems with the murkiness of data nowadays. I mean, there's been a lot of studies showing that even if you select to opt out of data tracking on websites, that a lot of those opt out signals just don't even work. That they're still tracking you. Now, that's probably being pretty pessimistic about the state of how this works. I know that some companies do actually, take their privacy seriously, but generally when somebody says, we value your privacy, you should probably run for the hills, because they don't. They value your data. That's what they value. So, sorry to have to tell you that, but they don't value your privacy. So I think we're done for today. I hope you we had a good session here. I hope it was enlightening for some of you. And if you've got any other questions, let us know. We'll put this deck up available for download for anybody that's interested.
Yeah, everybody, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it. As Jeff said, if anybody needs anything, please feel free to contact us. If we can't help you, we will try our hardest to find somebody who can. We always want to make sure that that we can help out as many people as possible. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you, everybody.